This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Representative Ron DeSantis has been in the district the past 2 weeks. Chairman of the National Security Oversight Subcommittee, the Ponte Vedra congressman, is serving his third term in the House. In a conversation here at our station this week, DeSantis told me the past 4 years mean he has as much or more experience than the other members of Congress from our area.
Well, you learn a little bit how the trains work. Now, I'm also someone as a reformer. I want to change some of that stuff, too. So you kind of got to walk a fine line there to a certain extent. But I think you do build relationships with people. And I think if you show proficiency in certain issues, then folks will listen to you. So, for example, with national security, it's been something I've been involved with a lot. We're trying to bring an aircraft carrier down to Florida at Mayport. So, you know, I have a little bit more credibility making that case as somebody who's now been there a few terms, has kind of shown that I understand America's role in the world, and then I have a Navy background, I'm in the reserves. And so there are ways where, you know, you're just having built the relationships, you can do more. And obviously working with the administration helps too, because I think they're receptive of expanding the Navy, getting to 350 ships, and I think a component of that makes sense that you would disperse our East Coast carriers and have one in Florida.
Hey, so on the national security side, how do you feel about what's going on with North Korea and obviously some terrible attacks there in Syria that America has responded to?
Well, North Korea, you really have kind of a slow motion Cuban Missile Crisis. You have this plump, immature, irrational kid in charge of this country, which is a brutal dictatorship. It's imprisoned 24 million people for decades now. And I think the chance that Kim miscalculates is probably higher with regards to his regime than probably any of the other rogue states that are out there. And so they're a nuclear power. They may not have the ability to reach the continental United States now, but they're trying and they're close, and they represent a huge threat to the neighborhood, particularly South Korea, because Seoul is about 30 miles south of the DMZ. So this, I said a couple months ago, North Korea was going to be a crisis on this president's watch. It looks like we're pretty much there now. And the good news is it seems that China has been receptive to trying to stand North Korea down. And I think if China is willing to exert their pressure on North Korea, we can probably deal with it in a way short of having some really high stakes brinksmanship, which North Korea couldn't deal with Western military might, but they could do a lot of damage kind of as Kim's regime's going out the door. And obviously we want to avoid that if we can.
Yeah. How do you feel about the different stance, I guess, that the White House takes now with this president versus President Obama? I mean, the way that the president, Trump, speaks to these other nations is a lot different than President Obama did, right?
Well, certainly he's got his own style when he does the Twitter and whatnot, but I think it is important to look at the actual actions that are taken. And I think what he's done is shown himself to be very decisive. I mean, if you look at what happened in Syria, there was a chemical attack on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, it was being reported. We're kind of getting the facts. And then on Thursday, his military advisors provided him with a course of action, and he acted immediately. And I think the same thing with what you're seeing in Afghanistan, where he says, look, if we're in this fight, we got to be in it to win. I'm going to empower my military commanders and let them use the tools that we've given them to the fullest extent possible. So I think those are important just for what they were, but I think they have a larger significance, both in terms of our adversaries, North Korea, Iran, even Russia and China, that say, wait, there's a new sheriff in town, but then also I think when you use something like the Moab, our troops, to me, that boosts their morale, because we've been fighting in Afghanistan with very restrictive rules of engagement, and I think we've lost service members because of that. Now we're saying, look, we're going to go whole hog and we're going to fight to win.
I saw that you had asked FEMA for some reporting on how things had gone in the wake of Hurricane Matthew. Where do things stand there, and are you getting the answers that you really need to address how FEMA has responded?
Well, we didn't get the answers that we wanted at the hearing, so we're having them give us answers in writing. But the problem with some of these local communities have is they clean up all this debris in some of the neighborhoods, and then they apply to have the FEMA reimburse them, and it takes sometimes years for them to get reimbursed. And so you have a tab of $150,000, $200,000 for a local municipality or community. That's a huge deal. Yeah, absolutely. So what we want to do is cut through the red tape. Let's speed this up so that the money can be sent back to the local communities for reimbursement. And if they're not entitled to that, then be clear about that up front so they know what they can do and what they can't do. There's a lot of confusion with a lot of these FEMA rules, and we want to try to avoid that so that we can streamline this and get it right. The other thing I would say is, as we're coming up to the end of Trump's 100 days, one of the things that I think helped him get elected was his message to drain the swamp in Washington. And that involved, one of the things that involved was term limits for members of Congress. I'm actually leading that fight in the House. The other thing it involved was a lot of ethics reforms, a 5-year ban on members of Congress lobbying, a lifetime ban lobbying for foreign governments, same thing with congressional staff. And I think that would have been an easy legislative win in his first 100 days. We drafted the bill just to track his speech so that we could put that out, because I think it'd be popular with Republicans, independents, and Democrats. And so I think it was a mistake not to have that be one of the first initiatives early on. So what I'm trying to do now is get with the White House and say, hey, let's push this soon, because these are the types, I think, of victories that aren't partisan in nature, but really show that you're a reformer trying to change Washington instead of somebody who's been captivated by Washington.
And we have more of our interview with Congressman DeSantis available to you online. Again, go to news4jax.com and the politics tab.